Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, The Art and Science of Benefit Auctions. We're super excited that you guys can join us today. I am Kelly Velasquez-Hague, and we'll talk in just a little bit more in a minute about who we are. But it's OneCause and Winspire today, talking about the art and science of benefit auctions, some very practical tips, some good content to help those of you that are entering into gala season get ahead of the game, thinking about your auction, thinking about profitability, and just sharing some best practices for what we've learned about the art side of creating a powerful auction, whether that be live or science, and the science that's behind it, and how you can use data, how you can use analytics to get the most out of your benefit auction. We've got a great agenda today. We'll do some quick welcomes. Then we'll talk about the art of benefit auctions. We will then talk a little bit about event marketing, and that's a subject that continues to come up on our webinars. People are always asking, give me a little bit more info on marketing, share some tips, so we will certainly do that. And then we'll talk about the science of success. How do you set yourself up? How can you think about your auction like a business, and how can you drive some profitability with some real hands-on and practical tips? And then, like all of our webinars, we will do a Q&A at the end. And so for those of you that are on, you can use your question bar. Go ahead and type any questions. We'll get to those at the end. We'll also be recording this webinar. Just a little housekeeping here before we get started. We'll record the webinar, and we'll send out both a slide deck and an audio recording afterwards. So you don't feel like you need to take notes. Just sit back, relax. If you're in the Midwest right now, you're probably enjoying lunch. If you're on the West Coast, welcome, good morning. And those for you on the East Coast, again, just sit back. We are going to get ready to roll here, and we look forward to a great webinar. So with that, welcome. I introduced myself at the beginning, but I am Kelly Velasquez-Hague. I'm the Director of Content Marketing at OneCause. For some of you, we'll talk in a few minutes about the customers on the call. You know, we recently went through a rebrand, so BidPal is now OneCause. But excited to talk to you today, just so you know a little bit about my background before I hand it over to Ian. I came to OneCause as a fundraiser myself. So years doing event coordination and director of development at a private school in Chicago. So a ton of experience living the beauty and the nightmares of silent auctions and live auctions. So excited to share some perspectives with you today. And for those of you new on the call, we do a partner series, and we're actually a great partner series lined up for Q1. And today's partner is Winspire. And what we try to do is bring partners on so we can all share expertise around the same subject. That's how to make all of us better, smarter, more successful fundraisers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian Lauth, VP of Marketing at Winspire, to introduce himself, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Ian, take it away.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Thanks for having me here today. I'm really excited to talk all about auctions, our favorite topic here. As Kelly said, my name's Ian. I'm the VP of Marketing. Or the VP of Fundraising here at Winspire, because that's what we study. What we do is we provide travel packages for your fundraising auction, but we're in the business of making your live and silent auction the most profitable it can be. So just a little background about me. I've been working here for about 7 years now, just studying benefit auctions and trying to produce content to help you guys, you event planners and development directors, just squeeze as much juice as you can out of these events. So really happy to be here. And just a little about Winspire. Kelly put up here, we put no-risk auction items out there, travel experiences specifically, that you can use in your live auction, silent auction, or fundraising raffle. For those of you who aren't familiar with how consignment travel works, it's great. It's a great tool for really rounding out your auction offering. It's free to reserve for your event. You can reserve any of our experiences, promote the heck out of them, and use them in your event, offer them in your event, and sell them as many times as you can, each one, and then afterwards you only pay for the packages that actually sold and raise money for your cause. So just a great tool for your auction, but in the process of this, we just study how to make auctions most profitable, and that's what we're going to talk about here today.
Thanks, Ian. And as I mentioned, we are OneCause. formerly BidPal. BidPal still staying a part of who we are. We're going to continue to talk about BidPal mobile bidding, but our company name has switched to OneCause. And a lot of questions recently about, why the name change. Well, we felt when we first started and we were focused primarily on mobile bidding, the name BidPal fit perfectly into what we do. But as we evolved along with our customers as far as fundraising software, what do we need to be successful at fundraising? We brought on text to give, online fundraising, online donations, online auctions, soon to come social fundraising, and the name BidPal just didn't capture all that we are and all that we do. And so for the last year, we went down a path of discovery and came with the name OneCause. And that really speaks to, I think, our why, is that we really believe in this partnership philosophy with our customers of together we have one cause. And really we're putting the causes, the fundraising at the center of everything we do, and helping through technology just raise more funds. So just a little bit about OneCause, and we are going to get to the meat of this presentation. Whether we're BidPal or OneCause, we've done over 13,000 fundraisers. We take that expertise incredibly seriously. We spend a lot of time talking to our customers, looking at the data. So we'll both talk in the art about what we're hearing working, and then in the science about how you can measure that to increase your fundraising success. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about the art of benefit auctions. We all know that a ton of effort goes into producing and putting on these events, whether they're just galas or they're casual fundraisers, but how and what are the tips that are going to help to get the most out of your benefit auction? We thought we'd start with our perspective on what makes a profitable auction. I mean, for me, and then I'll turn it over to Ian. And just so you guys know, the format of this webinar today is really going to be a dialogue. You'll see some information up on the slides, but we're going to talk, we're going to have conversations, and then, as I said, we'll open it up to questions. But in my experience, what really makes a profitable auction is starting first and foremost with the mission. Right? Everything has to be mission focused. You hear this again and again on our webinars, but your cause, your mission, what you do is so important. Communicate that at all times, and then align new fundraising strategies. Be out there thinking about new ways, learning from others, weaving the strategies with your mission into a really good, solid execution plan. And we'll talk about some of that later. That's what's going to help. That's what I see, what separates a really incredibly profitable auction from those that stay flat year over year. Ian, what would you like to add to that?
First of all, I love that. That's great. I mean, everything is about the mission and, raising money for it. So, and kind of what dovetails nicely off of that, right, is the donors that you have in the room, and that's your audience, which is crucial to running any successful live auction or silent auction is making sure you understand your audience, understand their needs, understand what they want, and then catering to those needs. And we're going to talk a lot about that here today. So, my action statement here, know your audience like you know your cause, right? Understanding their buying interest before you procure your items is just as important as telling an effective story about your mission before you make an appeal. Everybody knows that really emotional statement, connecting people to your cause, is a huge part of, before you make that direct appeal asking for money during an event. Same thing with knowing your audience interest before you go procure your items that you're going to put in your event as well.
Great. And this next slide coming up is, I think as fundraisers, we I know I was, felt, victim to this a lot, is I got so focused on my event that all I thought was like before my event, during my event, and then after my event. And what we're seeing is that really the world of fundraising and super smart, sophisticated nonprofits, big or small, are starting to think about how does their event fit into the total donor experience. So that event, what we're going to talk about beyond profitability, and we're going to continue to talk about this throughout 2018, is how do you use that event as a catalyst for your fundraising? How does that become, whether it's a new donor, a lapsed donor, or a current engaged donor, how does that event just become the springboard to help get them involved with you throughout the year? So this webinar is going to be focused on the profitability of your auction, but we want you to always think about your event within the context of what you're doing 365 days a year. Ian, you want to jump in? Anything you want to say to that?
No, I love this, and I love that we're starting to, and I've heard it preached, and talked about, but it's something that's so important, right? But thinking about your events in the scope of your 365 day a year, strategy. It's kind of like it's the one time a year where you get to bring everybody together and have everybody in one room and talk and be with them and talk with them, together, and then everyone goes off and lives their lives. And so using that as that springboard, like Kelly said, I think is a perfect kind of analogy here.
Okay, and we always like to start with a little poll. Go ahead and vote for those of you who are on the webinar. But how much has your auction increased over the last couple of years? This is a good barometer to give us an idea of where the participants are, and it looks like, wow, you guys, we're doing great. We're seeing in the average is somewhere between 10 to 20% increase, but we still have a large portion that are really only seeing about a 0 to 5% increase, or staying kind of flat, and 7% who are knocking it out of the park with more than 30%.
Can you share?
So I think yeah,
oh,
I can't share the results right now. What I'll tell you is that 38% of the people on the webinar right now are somewhere between 0 and 5%. We've got about 50% that are in that 10 to 20% range,
Gotcha.
and about 15% of our people on the webinar are doing more than 20% revenue increase. So I think no matter where you guys fall on that spectrum, I think there'll be some great tips that we can continue to share over the course of the next 45 minutes that we're together. So I think one of the first things we wanted to start to talk about is we have to think beyond the items, right? And really this idea, if you think back to those concentric circles that I showed earlier, is, what's the experience that you're creating? So Ian, what tips would you like to share around thinking beyond the tables and how to create an experience?
Right. Well, this is kind of, I love how this is definitely falling under the art section of this webinar, because it is kind of an art. It's where you are building up the excitement about these items, right? Whether it's at the event, the lighting, the decoration, how you're displaying them on the silent auction tables. This is where you can really have fun, and where it's important to focus some of your decorations, or even how your items are displayed, your live auction items. How are they displayed around your event space before the live auction happens? Or do people know what the live auction items are going to be, so they aren't seeing it for the first time when they see it up on the screen, right? And prior to the event, we're going to talk about marketing those items. It's all about building excitement and finding those biggest and best items that are going to get people excited, and making sure they know everything about it, and so that they're encouraged to bid when it comes time. And then a huge piece of that, right, especially for your live auction, is hiring a professional benefit auctioneer who knows what they're doing and knows how to draw money out of the room, as opposed to a traditional auctioneer, which all they think about is selling this one item. Like, how fast can they sell it? How high can they get the bidding? How fast can they talk? Professional benefit auctioneers during a live auction know how to connect with the audience and build that excitement. You can imagine an event is kind of like a crescendo, right? You get there, cocktail hour, silent auction goes, people are milling about, getting excited, getting a little looser. By the time dinner and the live auction goes, the energy is built, and that's when the auctioneer really takes it to the roof and uses that auction to turn it into a profit center.
Great. Thanks, Ian. So I think when I think about, creating the experience, and we'll talk a lot about this, I think, in the science section, is that it's really the combination of your items. And I'm not saying anything new that anybody else hasn't thought of before. I think as we start to weave the full picture, you'll get it's the items, the marketing, the presentation, the execution, how you bring it together. But really, I think what helps create an experience is knowing your formula for success. What are your proven winners? And we'll talk about this in the science section. Right. What drives that revenue year over year? And what are the new experiences that you're going to weave in? Because you've got to continually keep adding new elements to your event. You have to grab your attention. We'll talk about thinking about our auctions like a retail experience later. But it's all, you've got a captive audience for right. However long you're doing this event. They need to grab their attention. You need to sustain their attention. You need to engage them throughout, and just think about it, as an experience, an overall experience, as if you were going yourself to a store or on some kind of shopping spree.
And I'd like to say too, Kelly, like, it's more than just the items. Make sure every single piece of your event, every single piece of your agenda has a strategy for raising money. Any time where you're not playing a game or making an appeal or offering auction items or something is going on is lost time where you could be raising money. And there's so many creative ways to do it out there, especially while people are on their phones using something like OneCause, bidding on their items. Just make sure that everything has a focus on fundraising. You don't get distracted by kind of entertainment pieces that might not be raising money. You only have a captive audience for a very short amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And what we're doing here, now we're going to talk a little bit about planning and strategy. We're laying this kind of 30,000-foot picture for you guys, and then we're going to jump into 10 very practical tips that we'll share with you. But there has to be, in addition to thinking beyond the tables, there has to be a strategy. Like, what are you doing behind the scene in the months leading up to your event? Actually, the weeks after you just had an auction, starting to plan. But that planning and strategy, that really setting the foundation for success is so important. And Ian's going to share, I think, some of his favorite tips to pass on, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I think is important behind the scenes.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And yeah, procurement. Yeah, this is the world we live in, right? And procurement is. I'm going to throw something a little kind of counterintuitive at you guys today. So instead of going out and hitting the pavement and just knocking on every single door and seeing, how much or what you can get, and then trying to scrape together packages, figure out, from what all the stuff that you got, what can we make? Instead, I would encourage you to kind of flip it on its head and spend that time strategizing and finding out the interest of your audience. In the very beginning, I talked about knowing your audience is so important for the procurement process, because you can spend that time going and interviewing, your VIPs, the donors are going to be spending some money, sending out surveys, finding out what people like, what people are interested in, and then building a strategy to then go procure items that would cater to those interests, right? So strategy, building that procurement strategy is such a kind of an underused piece of this whole procurement process. You don't want to let your procurement dictate the items, right? You want to let your strategy for what items you want to go then dictate where you go to go ask for items, if that makes sense, right? You want to play to your audience interests, and I can't stress that enough. And it's something that I feel like is not talked about enough out there. And you can do it through procurement parties. You can have get your committee together, make it fun, get it offsite, and start brainstorming ideas and talking about your donors, how well you know them, what do you think they know, and then you can kind of start building that strategy for procurement.
Great. I would say, I think the thing that I think that is so important about behind the scenes is that thinking strategically about our auctions and giving ourselves permission to be selective, right? We don't have to take everything.
Totally.
And even if we do, and I know that this is like the catch-22, right? Well, I don't want to disengage a donor because they offered me this item that I'm not going to be able to use. It doesn't fit into my auction. It's okay to still take those items. But I think what we'll talk about is the emergence of online allows you to take some of those auction items and maybe move them into a different forum. But think strategically, be selective in your event. I would also say plan your physical capacity, like know your space. Before I even start, and as Ian said, the procurement process is so important, right? That's the nuts and bolts of driving the profitability. But you have to know your physical space, like on your walkthroughs, be measuring out, asking your venue contacts how many tables you can get in a space, knowing what the space can hold. So then you can have an idea of how many items you can actually fit on your tables and sell. This is a point that's often, I think, pushed to the side, but really knowing the physical space. And then laying on top of that, what do my donors want? Looking at the data, which we'll talk about later, and saying, oh, you know what? These are the areas that are hot for my buyers, and I'm going to make sure I load up my auction there. And make sure you use that data. Don't just rinse and repeat. Try not, I know we did this year over year when I was at Rogers Park Montessori School, is looking at our data and saying, okay, we got to call these 10 items out of the auction, they did nothing. Or this is hot this year, and we're going to talk about that next. Make sure that you're using data to drive really smart decisions that will end up becoming kind of the roadmap for your procurement strategy.
I love it. Let me just add one thing too, because I don't want to clarify, like, I don't, it's not to say you shouldn't be hitting the pavement and going out and asking for donations. I think what Kelly said is really important. It's about being selective about what you actually end up putting out on the tables, right? Any and all donations are great. Like, the $100, gift card from X restaurant is always awesome. There's so many different things you can do with that. It might not belong in your silent auction, right? There might be games you can play with it. The online auction is a great platform for offering it. But when it comes to, what items you actually put out on the tables for the silent auction and put together as a package in the live auction, that is where the strategy comes into play.
Couldn't agree more. Which leads us into the number one tip of knowing what's hot and what's not. So Ian, why don't you take it away?
This is great. Yeah. This is one thing I'm a big advocate of. I know I like to do it. Just go to events. You are all, I'm sure all you planners out there know the other events in town. You have friends that are at other organizations. Don't be shy about, asking and seeing if you can go. Say, hey, I'd love to do, kind of a swap. Like, please come to our event. And see how it goes, and I'd love to come to yours and go see what items are selling well, in your community. I'm sure there's a lot of very similar circles that your VIP donors are all in, and in fact, I know for a fact these days especially, most big donors are going to 4 or 5 events a year, right? So find out what maybe your competitors are doing, and offer it up. The collective knowledge is going to be a lot more useful than trying to hide your auction book, auction binder from everybody out there. So definitely go to other events. Find out what's in the news, what's hot, what's going on these days, who's in the Grammys, what sort of concert tickets can you go get, what are destinations you're hearing about, and then Kelly was just talking about this on the last slide. Make sure that those items that don't do well or haven't been doing well, you lose them fast, and don't be shy to, if that donor who's been donating in the same condo for 5 years, wants to give it to you, it's okay to say no, right? And there's other ways you can utilize that throughout the year. It doesn't have to be at your big main event. So, always popular hotspots, sporting arenas, celebrities. When it comes to packages and experiences, especially, an experience that has 3 different components in it. You have the area like a sports arena, but you also layer on like a meal, and then the celebrity component is going to really build the perceived value of that package much higher than the individual components would cost. That's really what you start to get into the live auction items, really getting those pieces that are going to have a huge net return. You're talking about in the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 for a live auction item, is if you can put together a really cool experience. And that's really what we specialize in, and why we've been so successful in helping nonprofits raise money, is because of that experiential component, building that perceived value of those packages. So examples being, the Hamilton is always popular. That's one of our top selling packages, of course, just because it's so difficult to get tickets, but now they have shows going across the country in Chicago, and they're coming up in LA. Cubs, that's a sporting experience, right? Wrigley Classic locations are always good, and then it's always good if you can get people to travel, right? They'll spend more if they can travel outside of your local area. So just some examples of what we've been seeing out there for popular auction items.
Great. And I'll just add one quick thing, to know the competitors. I think this is super important, and it doesn't have to be a rivalry thing. I know when I was director of development, and in development, we're all great at networking. So I would say pick a couple of similar nonprofits within a 5 to 10 mile radius of you. Right. And after your event, go for coffee, or we went for, cocktails, and we would share what did well. Exchange information. You don't have to exchange donors, but there's no harm in exchanging information. Totally. Okay, I'm going to cover this next slide quickly, just so we can make sure we get through all top 10 tips. But really, what are the top auction trends? I mean, obviously, everybody here can see travel, sports, parties. Parties are huge. If you're a school, you're probably already doing them or heard of them. If you're just a nonprofit that's not education focused, find a way to get parties into your auction catalog. What does that mean? Instead of selling a chef dinner to one donor, sell the same chef dinner in 10 different couple slots, right? You could make sometimes 1.5, 2, 3 times more by selling it as a broken up into fixed price slots than you can to a single donor. It's a great way to drive revenue. Schools are ingenious about parties. I encourage everybody to start thinking about incorporating parties. We're seeing children's art making a comeback. For years, art kind of languished, but we're seeing a lot of organizations. And if you're not education focused, find a way to involve your constituents, those that you help in the process of creating unique art. Obviously, entertainment and online auctions. But if I look at this pyramid on the right, this is where I talk about this with clients a lot, is you have to then think strategically about how to divide up your auction. And that at the tippy top, maybe 10 to 15% of your auction should be, high-end items, right? Those things that are really expensive, but maybe cater to the top end of your demographic. And then the next piece, really should be your unique experiences. How can I weave in things that don't have to be expensive? Again, it's not necessarily the monetary value, it's the experiential value that's going to help you drive revenue. And then making sure you're driving in new items into your auction, this idea of recycling what's hot, right? Take this, what's hot, what's going out, what are other schools doing, what are other nonprofits doing, what's selling these days. And then the base of your auction, 40% really should be about those known performers, right? Looking at your data, as we'll talk about later, and knowing what sells, making sure you always have that base. What we see is that a lot of groups will go radical and take out high performing items and bring in a whole bunch of new stuff, and then wonder at the end of the day why they didn't sell as much. So don't throw out your known performers. Okay, we're going to take one more quick poll. Ian, if you have anything you want to add while I get this poll queued up, feel free.
Yeah, right. Just that consignment, it's a tool, right? It's something where it's not meant to take up, you're not meant to have all of your items in your live auction be consignment. What consignment does is help you round out, the auction offering. If you get, 4 great packages donated, consignment's there to give you the other 3 or 4 so that you have enough items to really leverage that time that you have with your donors to buy those big ticket items. So she was talking about the pyramid there, the unique experiences. Experiences always sell well, and that's why we're in business. So did you do the poll?
Yeah.
Real quick, what you can do, go back for me real quick, Kelly, if you go back to this, and then if you, down where the poll, there should be a little button that says share results.
Sure. Perfect.
Boom.
Thank you. Cool.
All right, sweet. Interesting. All right, good. Well, yeah, it's something where it's not for everybody, but it is something where we want, it's something we want people to start using. If we can't, so.
Yeah, and here's the thing is, I'll talk about this a little bit later, and this is certainly, you don't have to use consignment, but if you are in a position where you need to layer in things to your auction, we can talk about how do you strategically use those components, right? Exactly. To help you guys drive more revenue. So Ian, why don't you share what the top consignment items are that you guys are seeing?
Cool. Yeah. So of the best selling experiences that we have out there, this is in order. Tuscany is always a huge destination spot, and so it's been our top seller for a while now. Napa Valley is always a great destination. Caribbean Paradise, Nashville, it's kind of more in the Midwest. Ireland over there in Europe, and then there's that sporting event in New Orleans. So what consignment helps you do, right, is get these sort of experiences that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get donated. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more in the later on. But as far as what we're seeing out there in the thousands of events that we're in each year, this is the top sellers. Great.
And so before we jump in, I'll give a little background about how I would use consignment. I would always use it very strategically, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But one question I get time and time again from customers is, how, if I'm going to use it, how do I get the most out of it? So we wanted to share some, strategies around if you're going to bring consignment in, what is the most effective way to leverage it. So Ian, why don't you run through your thoughts?
Absolutely. Yes. So getting the most out of consignment. This is for, let's say, again, you have those, 5 or so live auction items and you're looking for just a few more. And you know that, your VIP donors, your top 15% of your audience are going to be active in your live auction. Well, that's really not that many people to have to go figure out what their interests are. Let's say you have a 200-person audience, right? And that's only about 40 to 50 people is 10% of your audience, or about 20% of your audience. So you need to go out there and find out what they are interested, where they're interested in going, what their interests are as far as vacationing, and you can send out surveys. This can be your excuse for going and taking them out to lunch, taking them to coffee. Just kind of squeeze it in. Ask them questions about what are your favorite vacation spots. What are some things that you would be interested in bidding on when it came time to the auction. And then once you have all that data, you can bring it back and lay it all out in front of you, and you can start to see overlapping patterns, right? Where are certain people really interested in? There's definitely themes that happen. People are more interested in Napa one year, they're more interested in New York one year, right? Or going abroad one year. And as you collect that, then you can start to identify the items that are going to be competitive when it comes to the live auction, right? If you know 4 or 5 people are all interested in going to Napa this year, then you can start to pick a Napa package and make sure there's going to be some competitive bidding when it comes time to the auction. So just be upfront, be candid, be honest with your donors, and they'll tell you what they're interested in. They know what you're after when you're going and trying to put together a live auction. So they want to have fun when they're there. They want to bid on things that they're interested in. So asking about their preferences is not something to be afraid of.
Great. And I was always, I use consignment items pretty strategically, but I didn't limit them to my live auction. I actually, my team would use them to supplement the silent as well. And that's my recommendation is, use them sparingly, strategically, know what you want to do with them. Go in with the intention of, I always looked at consignment, and I still do when I talk to my customers, is a way to, you're like, okay, I don't have to spend time going and getting the Wrigleyville rooftop package. I'm going to then take the 20 hours it would have taken, and I'm going to go and get 4 other packages. So think of it as a way to beef up your efforts, not just your auction. And then I would decide up front, like I'd look at my live auction, I'd look at my silent and be like, where am I weak? Right? Between the two, where could I use this item to get more bang for my buck? So look at it across your auction avenues. And then we would always joke we use them like gel packs. I really mean that. I
never heard that before. That's good.
I'm not gonna use 500 consignment items. I'm gonna be really smart about when I use them, how I use them, because at the end of the day, they'll be a powerful tool to help me finish the race. So, think very strategically about how you use consignment, again, offsetting weaker categories, looking at both your live and your silent auction. And then again, it's not about volume. It doesn't matter if you have 10 consignment items, 20 consignment items, 3 consignment items. It's about the value of those items, and not in a monetary perspective, but if you know that you are in a place where it's cold in the wintertime and you're doing a winter auction and people can't wait to go to Punta Cana or anywhere on a beach, then use that, again, to Ian's point earlier, know what's hot, know your audience, use consignment very strategically.
It's all about perceived value, right? You talk about experience value, their perception of it, right, totally depends on their prior interests, where you are in the country, and how well it's presented, for sure.
You want to talk a little bit about selling multiples? And I'll give just a little background before I kick it over, Ian, is, we're trying to give you tips to making the most out of the auction. A huge driver of profitability is this concept of don't just sell one, sell a couple. So Ian, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, and this is something that we talk about a lot, and it's really important to kind of understand, right? When first of all, you can sell consignment packages, any one of them, as many times as you want, and it's a really valuable tool, especially because what ends up happening if you sell it multiple times, when you have multiple bidders engaged. Let's take the live auction, for example. You have 3 or 4 bidders all bidding for the same item. And if you stop the bidding and sell it to all 4 of them, they're going to pay a much lower price than one bidder would have if you would have kept the bidding going, and they would have bid it up, a bunch more, and then you have one high bidder, they would have paid a lot more. So not only is it, you raise more money, but you also have more bidders that are happier, right? Because they're paying a lower price for a package that they all want. And I'll give you an example. So an average price for a consignment package, one of our signature experiences, right, $3,000. And if you sell it to one bidder for $6,000, right, that's $3,000 in profit for you, right? Versus that same package, if you sell it to 3 bidders for $1,000 less, for $5,000, you've actually doubled the amount of money that you made. You raised $6,000 in profit, and you have 3 bidders who are happier because they paid less for it. So selling packages multiple times is a great way to really amplify and increase the amount you raise on an individual item.
Yeah, and I would say this is definitely an art form, right? There are some nonprofits I see do it, and they are so good at it. You don't even know that it's they're selling multiples. So my tip on this point is that work with your auctioneer or your MC, whoever is, if you're part of your live auction, to make sure you have a strategy about the items that you're going to do this on, how you're going to do it, so that when it comes time to sell it, it feels very seamless, it feels very natural, and it doesn't feel like, well, here's my bait and switch for you.
Yep. And just another quick note, it all comes down to the auctioneer. You don't want to tell people that you can sell multiples before you start talking about the item, right? It needs to be a surprise, otherwise people are going to wait and not going to bid. And for that matter, you want to space out your consignment items so they're not one right after the other, right? So you want to keep people guessing, is this experience one that can be sold multiple times? I don't really know. The last one wasn't, so maybe this one was, right? So don't tell people you can sell multiples, make it a surprise. And then it can also be done in the silent auction, right? And the best way to do that is actually after the event is all over. You go back to your bid sheets, you go into your bidding software, and you see who are all the bidders. If you have an experience on the table, right, you can see who all the bidders were for that experience, and you'll have a high bidder, right? But if you go back and you see, okay, there's 3 other people who are really interested in this, you can actually go reach out to them and see if they would pay for the experience at the price that they bid, and then go call the winner and say, hey, we're actually going to sell it to these other 2 people for this lower price. You're going to get a lower price for your experience, and then everybody wins. You guys raise more money. You have 3 happy bidders or winners, and the high bidder didn't pay that top price.
That's a great tip. We're going to talk a little bit about event marketing, and then I want to make sure we get to the science section. So we'll probably cover this next piece pretty quickly, but I get a ton of questions, as I know Ian does too, about how do I promote my event, how do I get the most out of my marketing. I mean, start early. I encourage everybody, the minute you're done with your event, all we need to all first have a cocktail and relax, and then we need to, celebrate, and then we need to come up for air. But after that, relatively short order, start planning for the next year. Do your debriefs, do your recap, and really start early. And Ian, can you put us on mute? I think I'm hearing an echo in the background.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I'm not hearing it.
Okay. I'd say start early. Think about how are you going to explain your fundraiser? What's the need? What's the help? What's the process? And leverage your technology. And if you're not thinking about a timeline for communication, start thinking about that. That bi-weekly, you should be communicating for 3 months before your event. And then 2 months before your event, you're dripping weekly, whether it's social or your internal communication material or vehicles. And then daily, dripping it on for a month before your event. But promote early and promote often.
Yeah, I'll be careful about daily, but yeah, frequent. But you can use social media, which we're about to talk about here, right? For kind of your daily communication about an event. Create an event page for your event. It's so easy. Hopefully you guys all know about it already, but it's free to do. It's super easy. You can create an event page, and that can be your hub for communicating everything about the event, new auction items that you procure, auction items, consignment items that you've already secured that everyone's going to really love. This is one of our great example. Young Actors Theater is one of our customers. who reserved Hamilton and made this post, and check it out. They have 52 reactions on their event page. So getting people excited, getting people to know what sort of items are going to be at the event before they get there. That's such a crucial part, because you can envision, the conversation that happens, Mr. and Mrs. Smith at sitting at their table, the hushed, oh, I want to bid on this. If they have never heard about the item before they get to the event, versus, communicating it a couple weeks or a month or two in advance. They have that conversation at home. They walk through the door of your event prepared to, having discussed how much they're going to bid on a certain item, and then they come ready to spend money.
All right. Let's talk about going online. I see this a ton. I have, customers who are saying, help me get the most out of my auction. And I say the way to do that is go online. Segment your auction. Think about items that didn't sell. Maybe they were okay the year before. How can I take those out and bring them online before my event? What online allows us to do is not just have 6 or 7 hours at the event, but really have a month, as long as you want, ahead of time. We're seeing groups go out an average of 34 days before their event, really getting the most profitability that they can out of their auction. And what it allows you to do is generate dollars before you even walk in the door. And so I'm going to give you an example of a group, and they think really strategically about how they're going to do it. They take their parties, and they do a VIP experience where you can buy pre-bidding only tickets. And then you're invited to participate online. They'll send a text to these donors. They bid the day before the event, and they walked into the door with $17,500 generated. What we're seeing is a psychological divide. People don't realize what they're spending online before the event. They are just buying, they're shopping. They are enjoying the competitive bidding online, and then when they walk in the door, as we'll talk about later, they're ready to keep spending. So I would say go online for sure. Think about the way that you can elongate your revenue, drive more profitability, rather than just 6-7 hours of on-site fundraising. Ian, anything you want to add?
When you have an online auction like that, it makes it much easier to share on social media, because you can post both the auction page and individual items and direct people to start bidding on it if you want, if that's the route you want to take.
All right, Ian, I'm going to let you take it away on communication.
Cool. Yeah, this is nice and short and quick. We actually have an ebook on this that I'll send out to everyone as well. It's a free ebook all about email promotion of your auction and your event. And there's actually a lot of we can talk about on this, but that's why we created this ebook. So I'll send that out afterwards. But it's really important to have consistent email communication. Highlighting, getting people to buy tickets, but also promoting your auction items and making announcements about what's going to be at your event. But it should be simple. Too much imagery, too much, too many auction items is too much for people to take in. People have very short attention spans. Before I get to that, so make sure you're using an internet service provider. That's your MailChimp, your Constant Contact, your Emma, all these programs that allow you to send to big email lists and segment your email lists, so that you can, have cool, stylish emails that look professional. So, Kelly talked about the email frequency there before. The frequency should increase as you get closer to your event, and getting people excited and informed about what's going to be the auction. But only promote the biggest and best items. Don't put your whole auction catalog into an email, and it should be 1 or 2 items max per email. So, talk about your cause, talk about who's going to be speaking, and then show them, hey, here's going to be 2 really cool items that are going to be in the auction. You can see that example there with Napa Valley and behind the scenes U.S. Capitol Tour.
Great. I'm going to share a tip that I actually learned from another school, and that was that you can segment your donors and think about who you're going to talk to, as in new donors, lapsed donors, and current donors, and really go after them through email communications in a much different way. So the lapsed donors, about how do I track them back? right? The new
I like
donors
that.
about how do I introduce them to my cause, and the existing donors are how do I rally them around what we do. But you can get super smart with email communication. I would say, target, segmented, use it effectively, don't overuse it. Social is something, when we talked about communicating daily, social is something you can do every day, right? You can Twitter your brains out. Email, we get 1,000 emails, all of us in our real lives, right?
Yep.
Be mindful about how you're using email. That's probably been my biggest tip. Know your gotchas, and just, use it as a way for effective communication. Just don't overuse it.
I love it. Yeah, real quick on that. I love the segments that you talked about, the lapsed, loyal, and new. And the reason that's important is because you can, the messaging in your email is going to change, right? The subject line is going to change based on who you're talking to, right? The messaging for lapsed people has a, hey, come back, check out what we're doing these days, versus new, like welcome, here's the new ways to donate, and loyal, thank you so much for being a loyal donor. Here's the cool stuff. So that sort of personalized messaging is going to increase the open rates. More people are going to open your email, and more people are going to click on it if you can personalize the messaging based on those segments. Those are great, Kelly.
Tip 8, here you go.
Love it. All right. This is one of my favorite topics, to think like a retailer, right? And I can't stress it enough. You are tasked, this is the, it's the one night only storefront metaphor, right? And it's crazy if you think about it. You are tasked with, if you ask any business person to do this, they think you are nuts, right? You're tasked with opening up a store one night only out of the entire year, right? Having, packing all the shelves with products, and then opening the doors to all of your customers, having them come through one night. You have to sell out of everything, and then you're shuttering your doors for the other 364 days out of the year. Crazy business model, right? That is what you have to do. So it's even more crucial for you to think about your donors like customers, right? Making sure that it's a retail experience. That's why we talked about in the beginning with decoration and knowing your audience, using the data, to understand your audience and their buying habits. And that way, and then you can cater the products that you offer them and how you offer them based on that knowledge, and be much more effective in the amount of revenue, right, or fundraising dollars that you bring in that night.
All right, how many items?
Yeah, always an interesting debate. I hear a bunch of different numbers all over the place, but I feel like there's some consistency that people kind of arrive in on these days. And what I like to say is whatever you can get done in under 45 minutes for the live auction, right? You want to leave 15 minutes for your appeal, your paddle raise, right? The cash appeal, but the other 45 minutes, it kind of depends on how quickly your auctioneer can get through items, right? Many the better auctioneers can usually get through an item in about 3 to 4 minutes, right? So that leaves about about like 10 items max, right, for the live auction, but we usually recommend between 6 to 10 for the live auction, but it's more about time, right? You want to make sure that your agenda is really spaced out. And then as far as the silent auction, what we like to say, Kelly, you might have a different number, we like to say half the number of buying units in the room, and a buying unit is typically a couple, right? And that's 2 people, one wallet, right? So if you have 300 people, that's 150 buying units, and then you take half of that, and I would say max, 75 silent auction items for a group of 300. But I would say that's even on the high end. I would even go probably a little bit lower than that these days, simply because the amount of time it takes to put together a silent auction versus the amount of return I'm seeing events get on the silent auction is much lower than the other two, the live auction and the direct appeal. So having less silent auction items and being more strategic about which items you place on the tables is going to net you a much higher return, and make it so you're spending less time putting out and actually using less space putting out all those auction items on the silent auction tables. What do you think, Kelly?
Yeah, we recommend usually 1 item for every 2 bidders. Now, that doesn't mean guests, right? Bidders, active people who are engaged in your auction.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to talk about using analytics. So whether you're using OneCause, mobile bidding, you're using an Excel sheet, you're using another provider as a fundraiser, it doesn't matter, but you need to be using analytics. You need to be looking at our data. We need to understand, as if we were thinking like a retailer, we're also thinking like a business. It's about driving the bottom line impact. And so I suggest using your reports all the time, understanding what are your top categories, what are your top items, draw a performance line and say, you know, anything that is over this is a performer, anything that's under this, I need to either think about not using it again or thinking about another way that I can use that effectively in my fundraising. But really looking at that data, looking at the spikes, you'll see that report on the right with the spikes. Smart customers that I talk to are really understanding not just what the items perform well or what categories perform well, but what times of the evening are they getting the most traction, right? When are they seeing bidding spikes? And, you know, how, when they overlay their program and they overlay their text messages, they overlay their communications, they get a real understanding again of the experience that they created and where are the success points that they need to continue to replicate. But using analytics, using your data should be part of all of the fundraising that you do for a profitable auction. And I would even say use real-time analytics. If you're a OneCause customer, your event manager, or even if you're a do-it-yourself, you'll have access to real-time statistics to see in the moment where you are and use that data to know that I need to juice up communications. But the science of profitable fundraising stems from how we effectively use our data.
Yep. Data is king, for sure. Awesome.
Okay, so let's talk about profit strategy. You go for it, Dan.
Yeah, no, just, I mean, this from the get-go, right? We're talking about being strategic about your event and making sure that you're squeezing dollars out of every minute of your agenda. And you know, from my perspective, you know, with auction items, it's so important to know your audience and cater to the interests of your audience. And then once you understand them, right, then you can really build your auction items to excite their eyes, excite their hearts, excite their minds to really come and spend money, right, which is the ultimate objective here. So using visuals, pictures, tank cards, items. What we do is we have an 8.5 by 11 display that can be actually blown up to a huge 36 by 22, I think, poster, and I highly recommend doing that for your live auction items, having them, you know, displayed kind of on the side of the room on easels, so that people can, you know, preview what's about to be in the live auction and you know, see what they might be interested in bidding on. And so visuals are key. Pictures are always worth 1,000 words. You know, using PowerPoint to, you know, build slides as the items are being offered by the auctioneer is so huge. I can't tell you how important it is to kind of, you know, and it can just be one picture per slide. It's that easy. If you have somebody just manning it, you know, going back and forth between all the pictures for an experience, it helps paint that picture in people's minds. And when that picture is there, the perceived value of that experience really starts to go up because they want it, and they get excited about it, right? And then the competition comes in, and then they start competing over it, and then you get a bidding war, and that's how the bidding goes up. So using imagery is key to strategizing for your live and silent auction, and always make sure to order a number or get a good order of your live auction. I mentioned a little bit before about spacing out your consignment items so that, you know, keep people guessing about, you know, which ones are going to be sold multiple times and which ones are not. And you also, you know, want to make sure that you have kind of a peak. If I talked about a crescendo, you kind of crescendo towards like kind of your main highlight package, you know, the biggest and best one you hope to have the most generated from, and then you can kind of have a few items on the tail end there. So the order of your auction items is also really important.
Great, thanks. I'll cover these next points quickly because I want to make sure we have time for the Q&A. I have to credit Sophie Streeter of Loyola Academy, if there's any Chicago people on this call. Sophie actually wanted to be here with us today but couldn't. She really helped me to think about how you use data to think about driving profitability. So when you lay out your event, think about it in revenue circles, right? So your tables that are most profitable, and I'm talking about silent auction right now, they should be at the center of the traffic flow. You should know where people are moving in and out of your event, what the traffic patterns are, and those high revenue generating tables need to be right in the middle of that path, right? So think really about how you're setting up your space. Again, your timeline, your buyer behaviors. What we mean by that is if you know your people congregate at the bar and that's where they spend a ton of their time, or they hang around the edges, you know, at high tops, you need to put your items within visibility, within a quick reach. Even if people are mobile bidding and looking on their phones, you want to have the back of their mind as they're seeing those items. So know your timeline, know your behaviors, know your traffic pattern, and lay that auction out accordingly, right? Know your table profitability, which tables generate the most revenue, and give those the premium spot in your auction. If sports are your top seller, man, put that in the place where you're going to see the most people. And yes, technology. I really think, you know, technology can help all of us drive more revenue because you're able to drive more bids.
Great.
Let's, I'm going to go ahead and skip over to the question piece. You'll get this deck afterwards. I know I've got a ton of questions out there about, am I going to get this recording? Yes, you're going to get the recording. You're going to get the deck. It'll come out tomorrow. But let's take some time to just answer the real life questions that we are getting from all of you. I got a question of can you guys elaborate on how you tie your auction to your mission? I'll take that one real quick, Ian, and then I'll pass the next one to you. Really, what we're talking about there is making sure that your auction is also communicating the impact. Where are the funds raised going? How are they helping your cause, right? Really connecting what you do and why you do it to why that auction is important.
And that messaging starts early too. Like, it starts in all of your promotion, or, you know, pre-promotion. You know, it goes into as soon as you are, you know, welcomed into the event, making sure that, you know, talked about recently, you know, your centerpieces. Make sure your centerpieces are, you know, mission focused. You know, when your benefit auctioneer ties everything back to the mission. They're selling for the cause. They're not selling the individual item. So just inserting it in as many places and reinforcing it throughout the event as much as possible, I think really ties that auction back to the mission.
Okay, and so we got another question. We have a ton of questions, and I think what I might do is take a look afterwards, and we will follow up if we need to on some of these. But what if you haven't found a winning formula? How do you develop it and discover it? Well, hopefully some of the tips that we shared today will help you. I'd say start with your data first and foremost. That data, like anything, will tell you the picture of what's working and what's not. So I would look in your data as the roadmap.
Kelly, I'm willing to stick around for an extra 5 or 10 minutes if we want to answer some of the questions too.
Sure. Will you get a recording of the seminar? Yep, absolutely. We will share that with you. We do a murder mystery dinner. Oh, I love these. For 8. That's been pretty successful. I love these creative ideas. We actually have a school party book out there. It doesn't have to be for just schools, but these are the type of ideas, these unique experiences that sell very well. Anything you want to add to that, Ian?
Is that kind of like a Clue dinner? Like you kind of partake in a little game of Clue at dinner? That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I would get on that.
Yeah. I have a question here about, please further explain the sell the chef 10 times party mentioned in tip 2. Absolutely. So parties, again, if you take an experience, let's take, because I'm from Chicago, Cubs rooftop. I could sell that Cubs rooftop to one buyer. They can take 10 people. I could sell it for $1,000, right? I could take that same Cubs rooftop and split it out into 10 spots and sell each of those spots for $200. Now I've made $2,000 on the Cubs rooftop as opposed to selling it to one person for $1,000. It's a different way of selling multiples. You're not selling the same item multiple times. You're taking an item, an experience, a dinner, and you're dividing it up into single cell slots, and you're selling those slots off to generate more revenue. Groups use it for 1.5, 2, 3 times revenue generation.
I love it. It's great for if you have a celebrity chef, if you got, you know, they agreed to cook a dinner for 10 people, right? So instead of having one person bid for that 10-person dinner, not everyone has 10 friends necessarily, right? You can sell just individual spots, turn it into a party, and even, you know, bring in some additional parts. Like that Clue dinner is a great example. If you had a Clue with a celebrity chef, you could easily sell spots to that. That's a fantastic idea.
Okay, great. I had a question on ROI. What is ROI? Return on investment. I had another question on what percentage should be new items in your auction. Typically 25 to 30% is my recommendation. Ian, I'm going to give you this one. How do you determine donor capacity? I want to maximize my funds, but I don't want to price people out of the range. What do you guys recommend as far as figuring out how to price an item?
So yeah, I mean, what we look at and what our fundraising specialists talk to nonprofits about whenever they're, discussing what items to put in the event, right? It's all about the demographics of your audience, right? Understanding, there's a lot of estimations and things that you can make based on prior donations from your donors, the demographics of your area, and then also, what their job titles are is another great way to kind of figure out what kind of level of donor you're dealing with. But and that just comes with kind of doing your research and strategizing and figuring out, learning more about your donors, right? And that's like we've talked about before, especially for the live auction. That's where you kind of have to be concerned about pricing people out. There's only going to be about 15% of your audience that's going to be really actively participating in that live auction. So there's not that many people that's involved in that small group. So taking the time and working with your, board or executive directors or whomever to introduce yourself, get to know them, get closer with them, understand their interests. And as you get to know them, you're going to get a much better sense of what their price tolerance is for a live auction package. So it's definitely not a blanket rule. It's very different in the middle of San Francisco than it is, kind of probably somewhere in the Midwest, right? That price tolerance is going to be different. So it all has to do with getting to know your donors and getting to know them well.
Great. I have a question. Are the online items separate from the items you will have at the event, and how do you choose them? Yes. Well, the answer to that is they can be. Be strategic about how you want to use them. You can start bidding online and then have those items over at your event. But if you have a banner year in procurement and you have a ton of items, then find ways to take those items and move them online. Don't even bring them to the event. Whether they're selling art projects or experiences or parties, you can move them online, sell them, shut those items down, and then just have a separate auction on site. Okay, Ian, last question for you.
Oh, can I say one thing about that? Somebody asked about return on investment. I just wanted to cover that really quick, just because I think it's really important about, investment, right? That can be a time investment, right? What your volunteers are spending their time doing. It can also be an investment when it comes to your event, like like hiring a band is an investment, right? But you have to think about what's the return on that. Is it really going to, generate more ticket sales versus, putting an investment in, good food or the venue. Those are all investments, and you have to think about what is going to be the direct return. What am I trying to do with this? Am I trying to sell more tickets? Am I trying to, get more people to come, or am I trying to actually raise more revenue, right? And that's why, figuring out what is going to be the best return on investment is so important, right? Should we spend money on consignment auction items so that we can get a bigger return from our live auction? It's just a key consideration.
Great. And then I got another question. Can you expand on the VIP pre-buying idea for online auction? Do those items close before the event begins or continue? With the VIPs that we've seen, they close those before the event. They allow a certain period of bidding on select items before the event, sent to a targeted group of guests via text message. They bid on them, and then they say those items will close at 7 o'clock. The event opens at 7 o'clock. It's a way to, one, drive out VIP ticket sales, and two, drive out the revenue before they even walk in the door.
Love it.
Okay, let's see. Well, I take a couple more of these. Do you find it best to put a category on high-end items that are in your silent auction? What's the best phrasing? VIP, high rollers, top notch? I'd say any of those. Anything that, and in your marketer too, like anything that indicates.
People like VIP. Yeah. Yep. Select, exclusive, VIP. One thing that we've been seeing a lot too is kind of a super silent auction, which is a separate silent auction area that's kind of maybe up closer to the stage, so people can see people bidding on it, right? And it's kind of cordoned off. There's like ropes, and it's for those are for your more expensive silent auction items, right? And those are where a good a Winspire signature experience. can't be in the live, you can put it in the sound. It's also a good place for like, if you have too many items or packages for your live auction. If you have 12 or 13, you don't need all of them. You can put some of those experiences in a super silent auction that's more VIP and exclusive, and that's where the high rollers go to bid. And I've seen that a couple of times, and it's been pretty successful.
Okay, I know we're over, but we have a couple of really good questions, and since we're going to do a recording, I want to go ahead and get these questions out here.
Do it.
Should a live auction display be scattered around or all in one place? Thinking about large poster displays, what have you seen that works?
Is that me? Yeah. I mean, I like to kind of flank the stage. You know, you have these posters that so people you want it in where people are going to go walk, right? And not everyone is going to want to go walk up in front of everybody in front of the stage, but you can also move them around, right? So if it's during cocktail hour and you have the cocktail hour and the silent auction in the hallway, maybe have the posters flanking the doors as people walk in. So as they walk into the venue, they can see what's there, but don't waste them. Don't, you know, if people aren't going to be in the hallway anymore, I would move them out to maybe the sides of the event, towards the front, so people's eyes are on them. It's all about marketing these experiences, these packages, these auction items. People know about it and people get excited about it. So think of yourself as a marketer when it comes to offering these items.
Great. I've got one I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to toss one to you, Ian.
Cool.
We've had the most questions on this webinar than I think I've had in a really, really long time, so that's great.
Love it.
Can I define gotchas? Gotchas are just anything where I call those as the things where you will disengage a donor. So the gotcha, when I was talking about email marketing, is over communicating. That's a gotcha, right?
Yep.
They're gonna tune you out and turn you off.
Right.
So I am just very sensitive when it comes. Know what your gotchas are with your particular audience. And would I brush back over silent auction items and buying units, please? Yes. So for silent auction, we're both Winspire and OneCause recommends pretty much the same thing, is that one item for every 2 bidders.
Right.
So that, or, you know, half the number of buying units. Same way to look at it.
Kelly, I think you made a really good point, though. It's important to remember it's 2 bidders, right? There's going to be a good portion of your audience, 10 to 20% even, that's not going to participate at all. Like, they're going to buy, they're guests, they're, you know, people, they're going to come maybe buy a raffle ticket. They might put down, you know, 2-3 bids here and there, but they're not really going to be that engaged, right? You really want to focus in on the people who are going to be actively competing for auction items, and that's going to be kind of about 75 to 80% of your audience, right? So taking whatever that number is, right? Let's do it easy, right? 200 people, right? That's 100 buying units, but probably about 80% of that is going to be about 80 buying units. And so you want to have 40 auction items, right? 40 to 50 max, right? And I've actually seen silent auction items shrinking, again, because of the amount of time investment it takes to put it together and what the return actually is.
Great. I got a question from Kelly Hill. Do we see people using mobile bidding for the live auction? No. Live auctions still continue to work best in that live auction format, but you can use mobile bidding to showcase those items, to preview them as you would your signage to get the word out and promote those items.
Yeah, but the live auction, you want people's eyes up. You want to let people raise their hand, because the live auction is all about, you know, look at me, I can bid on this big item. You know, it's about ego, right? So making sure people's big cars are up, eyes are up, the auctioneer's meeting eyes, and you want the audience fully interacting with the benefit auctioneer, because that's really how you get the momentum going. Yep.
And then I'm going to take a couple more. So we got a question about, can you explain why you prefer text messaging versus emailing? Emailing is fine leading up to the event. Text messaging is so effective when you're within the time frame of your auction, right? Use those text messages. You know, what is it, 80-something% of the population has a cell phone that's within 2 feet of them all day long. Yep. If they're at your event, chances are they're cruising around on it. They're looking at their items, they're going to Facebook, they're doing whatever they do, right? You want that communication to be right there in front of them. So we recommend texting, you know, doing your event. And then that's why I said, look at your reports after and see the spikes. Know when you sent your text messages out, and you can see whether or not that engaged them in bidding. Ian, I have a question for you. Somebody wants to know, They have 30 live auction items, and we're recommending far less than that. Can you give them a little advice?
Totally. Yeah, that's a lot, right? And it totally depends. I mean, some events are very unique, right? Maybe it's kind of like an entire afternoon where that might make sense. But if you're trying to pack 30 auction items into a 3 or 4 hour event, that's a lot. And it all has to do with just attention span, right? And that's why I talk about time. If your auctioneer is a superhuman and can get 30 auction items done in 45 minutes, then wow, I want to see them in action. But it really just comes down to, you don't want to lose people, right? If your live auction stretches over an hour, you're going to have people starting to get up, tune out, forget why they're there, thinking about the babysitter at home. You want people to be absolutely engaged and enraptured, right, by the whole experience. Even the people who aren't participating, it needs to be a really entertaining event. They want to see these people spend these gobs of money on these experiences, right? And if you can keep people engaged, you have that crescendo, and it helps really build that energy, and you can raise a lot more money in a shorter period of time versus losing people and having people kind of check out and start going home if it stretches more than an hour, hour and a half. I would say you get your live auction under an hour max. And as far as advice goes, getting rid of some of those auction items, I know that can be difficult, especially if you have kind of some legacy donors. That's where the super silent auction comes into play, right? Have a more expensive silent auction that's kind of off to the side and say, here, these are items that we can't put in the live. We didn't have time to, but we'd love to have you guys bid on it, because you want to use those donations for sure.
Okay, great. I know we still have a few questions out there. I will follow up after this webinar to make sure those questions get answered, but I'm going to wrap up with 2 questions that I can answer quickly, and then a final word from Ian. People are asking, can they get a copy of the school party book resource? Absolutely. You can also go to our website, OneCause.com, go to the resources tab, and you'll find that. But we will be sure to include that as well. The second thing is, can I get advice on, got a couple questions on this, how to design my Giving Center site. You're in luck. We're holding a webinar on the 13th. The email will go out next week where we will do just a product-based tutorial on best practices around designing your online Giving Center site. And then I think the final question for you, Ian, which I think was a really good one, is how do you suggest that people explain to their donors, if they're using consignment items, how they explain to their donors that not 100% of the proceeds are going back to the nonprofit? What do you recommend around that?
Great question. I love it. First of all, you don't tell them when it comes to the benefit auctioneer shouldn't say this is a consignment item. When they start to offer it, you can just say this item is brought to you by Winspire. That's all you have to say, right? The benefit auctioneer. But as far as explaining to them after the fact, right? Think about it this way. We talked about investment, right? When you are renting the venue, right? Are 100% of those proceeds going back to your cause? No. The centerpiece, the band, the chefs, the food, all of these are investments that you make to get people to coalesce in one area so that they will spend money, right? Consignment's the same thing, right? You are investing money to get a return, right? And our average return on our consignment items is about 40%, which is insane. If you were to talk to any business person again and say, here's this product, you're gonna get a 40% return on it, they would be in heaven, right? So it's what you're doing is you just explain, look, we have investments all over the place that we make into this event. We spent, you spend $100,000 to put on this event so that you can raise $200,000, right? The price that you pay for your consignment package is just part of that $100,000, right? It's an investment that you make so you can generate a return. It's all about ROI, right? And if that package wasn't there, that money likely would not be spent. So that's the best way to explain it, is that we make investments so that we can get you guys to come and partake and donate money and help us raise.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing. I think from the donor communication standpoint, if you don't feel comfortable talking about how much your expenses to revenue ratio is with your donors, I think one simple way to say that is, we're trying to raise as much money for our cause and this mission as we can, and consignment items allow us to just bring in more revenue and maximize the impact that we have, right?
Yep.
And leave it at that. So I thank you all for being on this webinar. Thank you, Ian, for being on this webinar with us and sharing information. But we hope you found it beneficial. We'll be emailing out tomorrow a copy of the deck, also the content that Ian mentioned, as well as I will try to get the school party ebook into that as well. Welcome to join us on the next webinar. We'll be hosting partner series every month. And as I said, on 12/13, we'll be doing a Designing Great Giving Centers webinar for those who are interested in learning about how to create more effective online auction sites. Ian, any parting words from you?
No, just thank you. So glad. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kelly, for inviting me on. This was a blast. Yeah, I love doing it. Let's do it again soon.
Okay. All right. Everybody have a nice day.